2025 A-Level Combined Mathematics Paper 1 Part A question number 10, the trigonometric question. This question says, express sine theta minus square root of 3 times cosine of theta in the form of r times the sine of theta minus alpha, where r is some value greater than 0 and alpha is some angle between 0 and pi by 2 radians. It's then asking us to hence find the values of theta such that sine theta minus the square root of 3 times cosine of theta has its minimum value. Now to start off, when we see something like this, we are immediately going to do the following. We're going to take sine of theta minus the square root of 3 times cosine of theta, and we're going to multiply and divide by 2 to get 2 times a half times the sine of theta minus the square root of 3 divided by 2 times the cosine of theta. Now the reason we're going to do this is because 1 half and the square root of 3 divided by 2 are famous trigonometric values. 1 half is equal to the sine of 30 degrees or the cosine of 60 degrees, and square root of 3 divided by 2 is equal to the sine of 60 degrees or the cosine of 30 degrees respectively. So now with this, we can convert this into something nicer. Now in this case, we are expected to convert it into r times the sine of a single angle. So in this case, we need to use the angle addition formula in order to turn this into a sine of a single angle. In this case, if we want to do that and turn it into sine, we need the form sine of a times the cosine of something minus the cosine of a times the sine of something. Now in this case, our sine value at the start is going to be theta, and this is going to be cosine of theta. So therefore, we need to convert this into cosine of something and this is into sine of something. So in this case, we're going to convert this into the cosine of 60 degrees and we're going to convert this into the sine of 60 degrees. So therefore, we're going to write this as being equal to 2 times the sine of theta times the cosine of 60 degrees, which you can write as pi by 3 radians, and then minus the sine of that same value pi by 3 radians times the cosine of theta. So now that we have this, we can convert this into a single angle. We can do that because the sine of a minus b is equal to the sine of a times the cosine of b minus the cosine of a times the sine of b. So therefore, if we do that in reverse, we can say this is going to be equal to 2 times the sine of theta minus the second angle, which is pi by 3. So therefore, we can see we have the form of 2 times the sine of theta minus pi by 3, where r is greater than 0 and alpha is some angle between 0 and pi by 2 is satisfied by this, and we can see if we do the values, r is going to be equal to 2, and alpha is going to be equal to pi by 3. So therefore, we have our answers. We have r sine theta minus alpha of the form where r is equal to 2 and alpha is equal to pi by 3. So now that we have this, the rest of the question becomes easy. The rest of the question says, hence find the values of theta such that the sine of theta minus the square root of 3 times the cosine of theta has its minimum value. Now, we can say that since sine of theta minus the square root of 3 times the cosine of theta is equal to this thing here, which is 2 times the sine of theta minus pi by 3, we can say that minimum of sine theta minus the square root of 3 times cosine of theta occurs when the other part, which is 2 times the sine of theta minus pi by 3, is minimum. So all we have to do now is to just find the minimum value of 2 times the sine of theta minus pi by 3. Now this occurs when the sine of the angle sine of theta minus pi by 3 is equal to -1, because that value of -1 is the lowest that sine of theta minus pi by 3 can go to. The sine function oscillates between -1 and 1, and therefore if we look at the minimum value is going to occur when the sine of this angle is equal to -1. Because then you're multiplying -1 by 2 to get -2, and -2 is going to be the minimum value of this whole curve. So therefore, we are looking for sine of theta minus pi by 3 is equal to -1. Now there are an infinite number of solutions for sine of theta minus pi by 3 equals -1. In order to find all of them, what we're going to do is to write -1 as sine of some angle. So we're going to write that the sine of theta minus pi by 3 is equal to the sine of some angle, which in the case of -1 is going to be 3 pi by 2. The sine of 3 pi by 2 is equal to -1. So now at this point, we have the sine of one angle being equal to the sine of another angle. The sine of any angle A being equal to the sine of another angle B means that A and B have the relationship that A is equal to n pi plus -1 to the power of n times B provided that n is some element of the integers. So this gives us an infinite set of possibilities for n, and for each of those, a and b could have that relationship, as in one of these n out of the infinite number of n could be the actual relationship between a and b. Or rather, if you don't know one of them, if you don't know a for example, then this relationship will give you all of the possible solutions for a in terms of b. So now in this case we have exactly that. We have sine of some angle being equal to sine of another angle. So from that we can say that from sine of theta minus pi by 3 being equal to sine of 3 pi by 2, we can see that theta minus pi by 3 is equal to n pi plus negative 1 to the power of n times this bit, which is 3 pi by 2. So now if we take this negative pi by 3 and we add it to both sides, we are going to get finally that theta is equal to n pi plus negative 1 to the power of n times 3 pi by 2 plus pi by 3. So this is going to be the infinite set of solutions that we are going to have. Now remember, we need to say that this is only going to be true for n being an element of the integers. So now for every integer n, for all the infinite number of n's that we could have here, theta could have one of those possible solutions. I think there's an infinite number of solutions, theta is probably going to be one of them, but in this case, since we don't know theta, we have an infinite number of solutions to choose from. And those infinite number of solutions are all represented by this single equation here. Theta is equal to n times pi plus negative 1 to the power of n times 3 pi by 2 plus pi by 3, where n is some element of the integers. So that's going to be all for this solution. Finally, let's discuss the marks that you're going to get for this question. At the start, when you do the simplification and you get to this point, when you substitute this half for a sine of cosine of pi by 3 and you substitute this for a sine of pi by 3, you're going to get 5 marks. Then when you do the simplification, you get to this format and you find r and alpha, you're going to get 5 marks each. Then when you go down here and you realize the minimum value of this thing is going to happen when you get the minimum value of 2 times the sine of theta minus pi by 3, and you say that it occurs when it's equal to negative 1, you're going to get 5 marks. And finally, when you use the sine of some value a is equal to sine of another value b's relationship to find this equation and write it down like this, you're going to get another 5 marks. So that's going to be the distribution of marks for this question. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any feedback, post them in the comments down below. Thank you for watching and goodbye.